Not every difficult person in your professional life is simply a personality clash you need to tolerate. Some of them are warnings, patterns of character that Scripture specifically identifies as dangerous, patterns that don't improve with time, patience, or proximity. The question isn't whether you'll ever encounter difficult people in business. You will. The question is whether you can discern the difference between someone who's simply flawed like all of us and someone whose specific character pattern should make you build distance rather than deeper trust. Today we're walking through 8 types of partners and bosses that Scripture warns us about, patterns that deserve recognition long before they cost you something significant. Proverbs 22:24-25 gives direct instruction here, warning us not to make friends with a hot-tempered person and not to associate with one easily angered, for fear of learning their ways and getting ourselves ensnared. That verse assumes something important, that proximity to certain character patterns eventually shapes us, or traps us, if we don't recognize the danger early enough. Let's walk through the 8 types together. Number 1. The flatterer who praises you to your face and undermines you elsewhere. This person makes you feel valued in every direct conversation, generous with compliments, quick to affirm your ideas, seemingly your biggest supporter. But somehow, decisions get made behind closed doors that don't reflect what was said to your face. Credit shifts, narratives change, and you're left wondering how someone so encouraging in person could be working against you elsewhere. Proverbs 29:5 warns that whoever flatters their neighbor is spreading a net for their feet. Flattery isn't kindness. It's often strategy, designed to lower your guard, precisely so you won't notice the maneuvering happening around you. If someone's private words about you never seem to match their public actions toward you, that inconsistency is the actual information, not the compliments. Number 2. The volatile boss whose mood determines the entire office's emotional weather. Some leaders are simply demanding, holding high standards consistently, and that's not the warning here. This is about the boss, whose unpredictable temper keeps an entire team walking on eggshells, whose good days and bad days determine everyone else's stress level, whose anger arrives suddenly and without proportion to whatever triggered it. Proverbs 22:24-25, again, specifically warns against close association with a hot-tempered person, precisely because chronic exposure to volatility trains those around it into constant anxiety, hypervigilance, and eventually into adopting the same instability themselves. If your workplace peace depends entirely on guessing which version of your boss will show up each morning, that instability is not simply a difficult personality. It's an environment Scripture specifically warns against remaining in long term. Number 3. The manipulator who uses guilt as a management tool. This person doesn't lead through vision or genuine motivation. They lead through obligation, reminding you constantly of everything they've done for you, making every request feel like a debt you owe rather than a genuine collaboration. Every conversation carries an undertone of, "after everything I've done," designed to make refusal feel like betrayal. Galatians 5:1 reminds us that Christ set us free, and we're meant to stand firm rather than let ourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery, a principle that extends beyond religious legalism into any relationship built on manufactured guilt rather than genuine mutual respect. If your compliance is consistently secured through guilt rather than honest agreement, examine that dynamic carefully, because manipulation dressed as loyalty is still manipulation. Number 4. The dishonest partner who treats truth as negotiable when convenient. We've covered this pattern before in the context of contracts, but it bears repeating specifically here, because a business partner's relationship with truth eventually determines the fate of everything you build together. Small inconsistencies in how they describe numbers, events, or their own past behavior are rarely isolated incidents. They're patterns that will eventually apply to you and your shared venture as well. Proverbs 12:22 tells us the Lord detests lying lips, but delights in people who are trustworthy. Ananias and Sapphira's partnership in Acts 5 wasn't undone by external circumstances. It was undone by a shared willingness to misrepresent truth for personal benefit. If your partner treats honesty as situational rather than constant, that pattern will eventually apply to you too, whether in the numbers, the timeline, or the promises made when things get difficult. Number 5. The boss or partner who consistently takes credit for others' work. Watch closely who gets acknowledged when a project succeeds and who quietly disappears from the story. Some leaders and partners have a consistent pattern of absorbing credit for collaborative success while distributing blame widely when things go wrong. This isn't occasional oversight, it's character revealing itself through a repeated pattern. Philippians 2:3 instructs us to do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility, to value others above ourselves, a standard that stands in direct contrast to someone who consistently claims shared achievement as personal accomplishment. If you notice a consistent pattern where your contributions vanish from the narrative the moment success arrives, that erasure isn't accidental. It's a character trait that will likely define the entire trajectory of your working relationship. Number 6. The controller, who isolates you from other relationships or opportunities. This pattern often starts subtly, discouraging you from networking with others in your industry, creating dependency by positioning themselves as your only viable path to opportunity, or reacting negatively whenever you express interest in growth that doesn't directly benefit them. Ecclesiastes 4, verses 9-10 reminds us that two are better than one and describes the mutual benefit of genuine partnership, standing in sharp contrast to a relationship designed around dependency and control rather than mutual flourishing. If a boss or partner consistently discourages your growth outside of their direct benefit, actively limiting your relationships, your visibility, or your opportunities elsewhere, that isolation isn't protective, it's controlling, and controlling relationships rarely remain healthy over time. Number 7. The perpetually discontent partner who blames every failure on external circumstances. Listen closely to how this person discusses past business failures, past partnerships, past disappointments. Is there ever any ownership at all, or is every setback consistently the fault of the market, the economy, an unreliable partner, an unfair boss, anyone but themselves? Galatians 6:7 reminds us that a person reaps what they sow, and a consistent pattern of blame, without any self-reflection, tends to repeat itself regardless of the specific circumstances surrounding it. King Saul's excuses after disobeying Samuel's instructions in 1 Samuel 15 reveal exactly this pattern: blaming the people, blaming circumstances, refusing simple ownership of his own choice. A partner who never once takes responsibility for previous failures will eventually apply that same blame shifting to whatever goes wrong between you as well. Number 8. The person whose ambition has quietly replaced their conscience. This is the most dangerous pattern of all, because it's often the hardest to spot early, since ambition itself looks impressive, even admirable on the surface. But watch closely for what happens when this person's ambition conflicts with doing the right thing. Do they hesitate, wrestle, choose integrity even at cost, or does ambition simply override conscience every single time, without apparent internal conflict at all? Proverbs 21:2 tells us that a person may think their own ways are right, but the Lord weighs the heart, a reminder that self-justification doesn't equal actual righteousness. Judas walked closely with Jesus for years, yet when ambition or greed or disillusionment reached a certain threshold, conscience simply didn't factor into the final decision at all. If you notice a consistent willingness to sacrifice ethics for advancement without any apparent internal resistance, that absence of conscience is the clearest warning of all, because it means there's no internal check left to restrain future decisions that might directly affect you. Here's the necessary wisdom underneath all 8 of these warnings. Recognizing these patterns isn't about becoming suspicious of everyone you work with or assuming the worst about every boss or partner who has a bad day. Everyone struggles. Everyone has flaws. And grace exists precisely because none of us lead or partner perfectly. The distinction is between occasional human failure and a consistent, unchanging pattern that reveals character rather than a temporary lapse. 1 Corinthians 13:7 reminds us that love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, and that posture of grace matters deeply in how we approach imperfect people. But grace toward a person and discernment about a pattern are not mutually exclusive. You can extend genuine grace to someone while still recognizing that their consistent character pattern makes them dangerous to build your career or business alongside. Proverbs 27:12 offers the clearest summary of everything we've walked through today, telling us that the prudent see danger and take refuge, while the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Discernment isn't cynicism, it's wisdom that protects you before the cost becomes unavoidable. If you're recognizing several of these 8 patterns in a current boss or business partner, don't ignore what you're seeing simply because confronting it feels uncomfortable or risky. Bring it before God specifically. Ask Him for clarity about whether this relationship needs boundaries, distance, or an honest conversation, and ask Him for the courage to act on whatever wisdom He gives you. Some relationships are worth investing patience into. Others are worth protecting yourself from. Discernment is how you tell the difference before the cost becomes too high to reverse. If this word helped you recognize a pattern you've been overlooking, drop discernment granted in the comments and subscribe so the next message reaches you before the next difficult relationship does.